Does everyone recognize this instrument? But it's well, actually, it's said to originate from the barbat, the Persian instrument. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. They call it oud in the Arab world. They call it gambus here. But it's considered the grandfather of all the lutes in the world. So it's part of the lute family, which preceded, let's say, the pipa or the lute, the European lutes, or the guitar. This is what came before. It's fretless, which means we have infinite amount of notes we can play here. Fretted instruments are fixed, and they prevent you from playing inside, just like the piano, which is part of the modern progression, which there's beautiful music, of course, and fretted instruments or fixed instruments. It's also argued that a lot of that the spiritual touch, those notes inside get lost. So we'll talk about that and how to bring it back. So going back a little bit to Pythagoras, I mentioned he knew about the microtonal music, and he knew the power of music. He also knew the potential, therefore, of its being, used for manipulation, which we see has happened. When, for example, there are countries like Tibet, which are being, in a sense, slowly erased, and the colonialist country, what is the main way that they try to erase the culture is with, listen to this other music, and your music is the traditional music is outlawed. You'll be sent to jail for it. And then as the music gets lost, the next generation doesn't even know, and they're singing the new songs, So they were right to have a secret society in a sense, because it does have great impact on us. Now, in the Arab tradition, Arabic music, by the way, we feel is at least 6,000 years old, if you will. And when we say Arab, of course, Arab Persia is the sort of overall area in the world. And we can see that some of the instruments have existed at least since then, but very likely earlier. The pyramids, for example, in Egypt, have pictures of the nai, which is the reed flute, the central flute to the music, indicating that's at least 6,000 years old. So the tradition, even though Arab culture is politicized greatly, the fact remains that it's as universal as, aromatherapy. We don't question or argue that it's important. Aroma, we call aromatherapy, but these aromas were smelled by our ancients for thousands of years, part of the tradition. Frankincense. And, we also don't question, other traditions like meditation and yoga and so forth. So the Arabic music, really, you could almost define it in a different way. It's sort of like a world tradition. It's a world music, and it carried a very deep theory and study with it. Now, Ziad, an Arab, started the very first music school in Al-Andalus in southern Spain, and it was the first time they put together theory of the music and a whole wealth of texts and a whole body of music that we actually still play to this day. This was maybe around, let's say, 700 AD, and the Arabs were in southern Spain for about 700 years. Now, we can trace the sounds of Arabic music far from there, all the way out to East Asia. represented in the kind of instrumentation, in the sounds, in the way the instruments are played, and it's very possible that the study of Arabic music, so to speak, was the study for a long time, just like Western music is a study today. And we take for granted that, yeah, you go to music school, you study Western music. But what happened before that? You know, a lot of the music schools have maybe one world music class, you know, overviewing, you know, Asian music and Oriental music and Middle Eastern music, and so, which is not good enough, as we know, because there's this, and it's, you know, part of the sort of political conversation of what Pythagoras hoped to prevent, which is if they find out how powerful this music is and how important it is to our health and well-being and spirituality, they're going to take it away. So the Arabic music has a microtonal system, and it has it's called maqam system. Maqam means scale. And while it is a secular music, means it's not a fundamentally religious music, Islam has preserved a very important aspect of the music, and a very intense study of it, which is, for example, what the sheikh is doing. When he's reciting the Quran, he's essentially doing something called the taqasim, which is the art of improvisation in Arab music. And taqasim will address certain maqam, certain maqamat, or certain scales, and modulate between them. The maqamat themselves, as well as the modulation, is used to give us that sense of or Allah, or the ecstasy, which we call tarab. So ecstasy is not exactly the definition of tarab, but it's the best word we have. Let's say spiritual ecstasy, or you know, an ecstasy that's in your heart, or like a cleansing or feeling of connection, of oneness. Now it's embedded in these scales, which each scale has such a personality that, let's say, would be played at a different time of day, or maybe one scale at night or one scale in the morning. So to demonstrate, and you guys can interact, I will place a maqam, and you'll tell me, you know, on the spectrum of happy to sad, you know, what is your feeling? So what's your impression of this scale, happy or sad? Sad. All right, how about this one? What about this one? Sadder or happier than the last one? So we were here. And then we went to. You feel the difference? Do you feel the difference? There's a feeling of a difference, right? And the amazing thing is this is a difference of only one note, which is what's so fascinating about music, which this starts on C. This starts on D. Totally different feelings, right? Right? And we have another maqam, which typically is the adhan, or the main call to prayer. What's the feeling of this one? Happy or sad? Still sad. So again, we just changed one note. We went from, let's say, okay. How about this one? What's the feeling of this one? It's still sad. Is it more sad or? More romantic. So the difference of this scale versus we create tension in this scale. Literally in musical terms, there's also tension whenever you have F and F sharp next to each other. And we remove the G, so D, E half flat, F, F sharp. But we release that tension when we bring back the G. So, when we play Oud, Gambus, when the Na is improvising, when the Sheikh is reciting, we're employing the same methods, right? So we want to take the audience, so to speak, for a journey. Now, in Arabic, they call Samia. Samia is the audience who knows. They know what they're hearing. So, for example, you'll hear like in Mecca or however, you'll hear everyone say ah or Allah or no, and they're also considered samia because they know. It's not only the words. It's the sheikh is playing upon a maqam, and he modulates and pulls everybody with him, right? And then he ends with a sweep of notes that completes the whole scale, descending back down, called qafla. And that gives this like feeling of the tarab, or the spiritual ecstasy. Right? So it's a touchy subject obviously now, because Some traditions want to remove the music from the Quran. It's even haram to say music in some traditions, which is obviously very sad, And spirituality overall, like we were saying, is part of the human fabric, Only until recently, especially in the West, you have this idea of atheism or spirituality only being seen as a structure within something that tells you that you have all these rules and ways of being, and so many people are rejecting religion and unfortunately are rejecting all of spirituality, not knowing really what spirituality means. Same thing, you can have people who are practicing Islam, practicing Christianity, but don't understand the spirituality within it. And don't understand how natural it is for all of us to feel music, to feel close to the nature, to God, to feel love, very basic concepts of spirituality. So the important thing I noticed in Malaysia, which I noticed how much the tradition is actually directly descending from a sort of Arabic music tradition and language. And it's important as practitioners, if you're working with youth, so forth, address this because it's there. It's still very close. I heard some of the older Malaysian songs. They're totally Arabic, same rhythm, same instrument, same melodies, and what I hope for the youth, is to really also understand what they're hearing when they hear the Quran, which can only bring, which can only deepen the spirituality, and deepen therefore our health and well-being, and comes full circle to the conversation of what therapy is, right? Therapy besides the spiritual aspect is also identity building. If you're working with kids, culture is a very important aspect of identity. Also, very important aspects of identity are how you use your body. How are you in creative life? Do you have a creative life? Do you paint? Do you draw? Do you play an instrument? These are essential. I use this example a lot when I was working at a children's psychiatric unit in New York. I noticed, so the kids are there court-ordered. They're deemed a danger to themselves or others. They're not allowed to leave. They're placed there. So by law, they also have to go to school. So there is a school within the psychiatric centers. They're sort of like prisons, lockdown prisons. And I noticed that the kids were playing, dodgeball and things like this, but they had a music room which they weren't using. So I said, why is this happening? Why is there nobody there? They said, we try to hire a music teacher. They don't last one day here. I said, let me teach something. They had a drum set there. So they said, okay, we'll give you a group of girls to teach. But I want you to know that these girls are bad news and they're really dangerous and you should watch your back. And I said, okay. I already had a feeling of what that meant, being a kid that was also seen as bad news, growing up as well. I was simply so frustrated with the school system and with the authority figures, and so I felt for them, So the girls come in, and they're placed on all these different drugs, for whatever disorders, and I sit them down and say, okay, we're gonna learn drums. And so they're learning drums. And as you know, it takes a lot of coordination and focus to play drums. It's 2 arms, it's 2 legs. And they're learning. And then they start to teach each other, and they're laughing. And later on, the staff of the hospital come in and see them, and they say, how is this possible? These are the same girls. I said, of course it's possible. Majority of the life of these children, there's not enough love at home, or there's trauma at home. There's just authority figures at school. There's more just adults treating them as bad, as damaged, as whatever they went through. They're implanting the identity of what they went through, or their background, or what part of town they're from, you know, or what crime they committed. That's their identity, right? And so if you come to youth with that approach, that's what's going to come back. You know, you have to believe, and again, everything always relates to spiritual practice. I mean, you have to love, and you have to understand, and you have to be at the same level, always, as a teacher, or as a therapist, or whatever. And you have to come with love. You have to come with something genuine and something meaningful that the child can actually take with them. It's not just something to blow off steam. It's something to build identity, right? So when they were learning the drums and playing the drums, what really moved me and taught me so much was when the girl said to me, you know, I'm a drummer, like with this incredible pride, you know, you could feel it radiating from her. And you got no sense that she was, quote, sick or whatever, right? We also have to remember in psychology that the word disorder, it's not lying. It's not trying to cover up what it means. Disorder. You do not function in society. That's all it means, you know. There's a lot of research, even about schizophrenia, you know, which talks about, is this a disorder? Is this a mental break, something wrong with the brain? Or is this actually potentially a prophet, someone who receives, you know, messages from God, you know? So it's always bears just, you know, questioning. ADHD too, this is a big topic, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And I don't know about here, but in the West, they pass out pills like candy now to the kids from an early age when their brains are still developing. Now, ADHD, in the research, it's actually, there's no real biological foundation to ADHD. At most, they saw that maybe the metabolisms, they'll burn quicker. But in general, the ADHD children are also usually placed in the gifted and talented groups, the ones who quote, more creative or learn faster. So we always have to also look at the systems of schooling. For example, there's nothing natural to sitting for many hours in child development. That has nothing to do with healthy development at all. What's healthy is the running around, and it's healthy also to have a lot of creative, as they call, outlet. But now in this conversation, we know it's much more than an outlet, to have creative opportunities. So essentially, we're drugging our children. We're diagnosing our children with disorders based on the modern style of education, which is the opposite of what healthy education should be. It's more meant for, you know, in general, especially in the West, to build, you know, people who will serve capitalism better. You know, you're learning certain topics and you're behaving in a certain way. And we always have to watch out for this too as practitioners, you know, and not just immediately believe what we see written on the paper about the child. You know, like look into what's happening at school, what's happening at home, and don't automatically see someone as sick or damaged. Because again, you can cut me open, I could cut you open. I can't find damage, right? I can't find, you know, your trauma, okay? Now, going back to the topic of you know, crying. So all over the world, and this is a product of our conditioning, you know, we're not so comfortable with saying I love you and crying on a dime, even if we may feel it. For many of us, that's such a weak muscle that we can't even touch it. Also, it becomes a weak muscle to say, no, I don't like that. You know, no, to say no, or to reject something. We start to become, you know, afraid to go either way. And so another reason why we start talking about art therapies, the arts therapies next, is it's an outlet that if the crying and the basic expression is not there, you know, the arts can lead us back into the healthier ways of being able to cry and being able to express love and receive love. So, and the also talking about spoken word and poetry. Again, this is, you know, especially in the West too, a lot of people don't understand why we do that. Why poetry? Why spoken word? Why storytelling? And I believe there's a direct link to what I opened up with the conversation, which is how they know when someone experiences a traumatic event in war or a natural disaster, why they need to speak of it right away. Nowadays, we have a movement, I'm not sure if it's around the world per se, but it's called Me Too. Me Too. It started, you know, a lot of women have been exposing what they've been going through at work, or, you know, there's still, you know, the topic of women, you know, it's, even though it seems like things are better, there's so many fine nuances that we have to focus on, and now we're noticing, like, okay, a woman, yes, she's hired at this job, but how is she being treated? Is she being hit on? Is she being heard? Is she being, and now a lot of women are speaking out, and a young woman who really inspired me so much recently, she's 19, and she went through, like, basically her mother involved her in, like, sex work since she was like 10 at home, and made her drink and all this. And she used the platform of social media to describe in detail, everything. Some people maybe were upset at her for, you know, doing that, for, you know, exposing, that's like dirty laundry, you're not supposed to do that. But she did it, and she's responsible for her own healing in the telling. So we can tell in music, we can tell in art, and we absolutely can tell in words, and must. Now, obviously, we can't push that, we can't force that. It has to be the decision of the youth, of whoever experienced the trauma, to do that. But what it does is absolutely very healing, and we can say almost more damaging in a sense than the event itself is the holding the secret of it, the holding down, the swallowing. Unfortunately, a lot of the abuses that occur in families, oftentimes the families, the mothers say, don't tell anybody. So the shame builds. And the shame really is that pill that's swallowed. And as we see, it can manifest in all kinds of somatic, you know, physical, emotional, anxiety, depression, you know, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So the telling is very important, you know. So words, music, art, all these, the whole spectrum is essential. And last but not least, there's I think what they should add to the topic of arts therapies, in a sense, because it belongs in the same realm, is the therapy of giving back, of contributing. It's another thing that the world a bit is conditioning us away from, intentionally, because it's to our ultimate health. I've had friends who, a very good friend of mine suffered from suicidal thoughts and depression and heavy anxiety her whole life. We lived together in Lebanon. She worked for a major TV company. She was executive producer, had this big job, but she was like suffering. Suicidal thoughts. I started to teach refugee children already at that time, And I said, you know what, come with me. Come teach. She's like, I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to teach. I said, come. I had a feeling. You know. So she did famously. And I swear, after like a few months, she quit her media job, which she had been for years doing, and just started teaching refugees with me. And then we formed the project Juthoor, the Arabic Music and Language Project. And now she's like, she has this big musical director job in Kuwait, and she's working with children all the time, and she's a different person. So again, like, you know, in modern psychology, modern medicine, they want to say this: you're sick and you're sick forever, and this is what happened to you, and that's you. Or this is, you know, you're like this, right? It's not true. It's not true. You know, you have to see that it's not the identity of you, whatever happened to you, or whatever you went through. You can be anything. You can be cured. You can be cured by the arts, and you can be cured by giving. By giving. You know, just that first moment of being able to touch someone else's life.